Hey all, welcome to week 7 and giant number 6 or second last giant, which is the giant of fault finding. Welcome back. So, hmm, respect due to this giant though. For real, for real, for real, for real. Because this giant has 4 heads. And I had to choose one, I had to give it one name. And so I chose fault finding because if I called it the blaming, complaining, excuse making negativity giant, that's too much of a mouthful. So in explaining this giant, this is what I wrote in the book. The funny thing about this beast is that you often see it looming in the lives of others, but you seldom see it when it's standing right in front of your own path. Ask me how I know this. You would think that a quadruplet would be hard to miss, but many folks have befriended this beast and are entirely unaware. I lump them all together because these four are like they like each other's company. For example, blame and excuse making are best friends. For example, if a catastrophe happens in your home, it is relatively easy to make an excuse for yourself and shift the blame to others. These four create a vortex of negativity that sucks you in the wrong direction, and personal growth requires positivity. You cannot be positive when you're continually grumbling, complaining, blaming others, and making excuses for yourself. So that's what I wrote in the book. So as very embarrassing as this is for me to admit, all these ugly fellas were present in my life. In the life story that I start off the book, the chapter with, I was talking about one day I felt like God challenged me to write an email without putting any excuses in it or without having to explain why I did something or why something is happening or why something was late. He said, just talk, Dawn. Don't look for excuses. So I am well aware of this giant, but I'm exceedingly grateful, for my present revelation of the existence of this four-headed beast. And I'm still on the lookout for it because it has detrimental weapons that affect my life and the life around me. And similarly, it will for you. My natural temperament, people, I am not sanguine. I'm not outgoing. I'm a very introverted person, and melancholy, I think, would be where I fall in the personality traits. And so sometimes it takes a lot of effort for me, but the effort is well worth it because this giant, complaining, negativity, grumbling, complaining giant, it's awful. I didn't have to look too far to find my biblical example. I mean, God's own people, the Israelites, provided me plenty of examples for this giant. They complained, they grumbled, they dug up the negative, they did the works, and I mean continuously. They do the dog, as people would say, and then things would be forgiven, and then they go back there again. But before we go judging these, I can't remember, it's 2 million of them. Before we go judging the Israelites in their whole journey around the mountains, I'm sure a good few of us would have done the same thing if we were in their circumstances. But they paid for their fault finding lifestyle. They did. And we will too if we really don't learn to cut it out. Modern day examples are also very plentiful because if you look in your home or in your office, you watch the news, you scroll social media, my goodness mercy me. Especially in a year such as 2020. You will see this giant looming large and in charge. Everybody and their mother are making all these negative comments. So if you go on social media, you will find a whole set of negative Nellies and doubting Thomases and grumbling and complaining. Oh my goodness, because this year has brought out that beast in his ferocity. If you have been challenged in this area, I suggest that you find your weapons and get at it, because this four-headed beast, blaming, grumbling, complaining, and excuse making, is a destructive force against you moving forward towards your success. This giant does not play fair. And if you don't get a handle on it, this is some of their weapons. Self-pity. Oh my goodness gracious. It will land you. Listen to me. I talk about this in my books quite candidly. I could throw a pity party like nobody else. Okay, so I know all about self-pity, but really, I don't know what it does for you, but all it did was give me migraines. And when the pity party was over, that was exactly where I was when the pity party started. But when you get caught in this vortex of negativity, self-pity comes. Then there's the release of word curses. And what I mean by that is when you get yourself in this fault finding mode, you open your mouth, and from your heart your mouth is going to speak, and you start saying all of things, and you spewing things, and you're releasing curses on yourself and on others, whether you like them or not. I'm sure that this is not, if you stopped and thought about it, you know, you really wouldn't, but it just comes out. You're hurting others because this giant is a lot of blame. Is a lot of blame. So you know, you're so angry and so negative, and you're blaming everybody all around you, and you're blaming all circumstances, and it causes you to dishonor others. It causes you to dishonor those in authority, and this can lead to nowhere good. So you're sitting there, you're finding fault with everything, you're opening your mouth, you're releasing all these negative curses, you're dishonoring those that you should really be respecting, and there we go. And then you have the victim mentality, because then here comes the woe is me, everything bad is happening to me, everybody intended to hurt me, everything that you said or you did is against me, because you have this huge victim mentality. This is one of the most destructive ways that this four-headed beast comes at us, and then we contaminate the atmosphere. It is similar to depression when I talked about it, just releasing this fragrance of darkness. It's the same thing. You just you know, because we are just a very bandwagon in creation. So somebody starts complaining about something, and you jump in, and then you adding to it, or somebody makes a comment on social media, and you feel that you have to add your 2 cents, and then we have this one long list of grumbling and complaining, and oh my goodness me, and contaminating the atmosphere. So all of these are some really serious issues. So how do we combat this? It's not like we can just give in to this four-headed beast, because we will never get to where we want to go. So some of the weapons that I talk about in the book, I talk about learning to refocus. And this is really something you have to do. Take concentrated efforts to stop and think, okay, what am I really thinking about? Why am I thinking about this? And can I put my focus on something else? Sometimes you don't have to. You think that you have to, but you don't have to stop and take in all the news and grumble and complain about it and find fault and blame. You don't have to. It's a choice. We all have choices. And sometimes we wonder why we are in these rotten moods, and it is because we are focused in the wrong place. So my first tip, my first weapon is to learn to refocus. And then I talked about learning to be grateful. Learning to be grateful for what you have really helps you to stop complaining sometimes. And sometimes it takes an effort. You wake up, as I said, I have a melancholy personality, so this is something I have to concentrate on. Sometimes you have to stop. You wake up and your foot is aching, and you want to start complaining. But you know what? The other foot is working. Your 2 arms are working, and you can see. So as long as you have life, you have hope. And even though it may seem like 10 things are against you, you can usually find that one thing, and you may not feel like it, but at least open your mouth and give thanks for that one thing. And soon it will be 2 things, and soon you'll notice something else. You know what? Yeah, they got into my shower, and I didn't, you know, and I'm like, thank God for water, because then you remember the time that you didn't have water, or you remember when the water heater wasn't working, you had to bathe in cold water. So you have to give thanks all along the way. And another way I said we can come against this was to self-analyze. Remember, in one of the earlier videos I spoke about the fact that we often do not know ourselves, and we often, sometimes we don't want to choose to look inside our soul and see what's really inside here. So we have to stop and self-analyze instead of trying to figure out what is wrong with everybody else in the world. Maybe, just maybe, if all of us took the time and stopped and say, okay, what is wrong with me? What is in my soul? What are my mindsets? What is, dirty in there or confused in there? What needs work? And we all started to work on ourselves, and this world would not be in the state that it presently is in. And I also mentioned being humble. You have to try to be humble. Try to figure out what that really means for you. Don't let arrogance and pride and self-centeredness just stop you from going somewhere and from belittling others. And try to figure out what that means and be humble. So I want to give the quick tips at the end of this particular chapter, which I can I can testify to all about it. Sometimes you have to look back, and I remember saying to my two sons, now man, I'm like, boys, I am so sorry, because a lot of the times when you are facing these giants, you don't really even understand it. You're just going from day to day to day to day. It's only when you look backwards or you see it playing out in somebody else's life, you're like, oh my goodness. So I may say to my sons, forgive me for all that time that I was depressed, or I was grumbling and I was complaining instead of being grateful and thankful and enjoying being a mother to you too, But they're like, no, mommy, it's good, it's all good, but still. So take a look at yourself. So some of our quick tips for fighting the four-headed beast of fault finding was: one, think about what you're thinking about. We could sit all day long and let our mind go here, there, everywhere, picking up everything in the atmosphere, everything somebody say, and we start thinking about that. We pass the news and we start thinking about that. What are you thinking about? Think about what you're thinking about, and you can literally hold your thoughts captive. God instructed us to do this, and he never instructs us to do something that we are not capable of doing. He's not an unfair God like that. So we are capable of holding our thoughts captive. Secondly, I said, find a place or a person to help you process your negative emotions. Life is not perfect. Life is messy. Life can be very, very painful. And some people are more emotional than others. As I said, I used to be, and still I'm quite an emotional person. But you have to find a way, a safe place, a pastime, a person, a therapist, or something to help you process your negative emotions, so that they're not staying inside of you and just coming out in this vortex of negativity. Put yourself in another's shoes. We talked about this. Be ready. Be respectful and compassionate. A lot of the things we can't figure out, how our children get so disrespectful, how they're not submissive to authority, how they are dishonoring their teachers. It is because what we are teaching them as adults. So we have no respect for authority. We have no respect. We get there and we grumble and we complain and and our children are watching us. So similarly, they take on these things. We said another quick tip was speak the opposite. Even if you don't feel it, watch what's coming out of your mouth, because your mouth has creative power. So even if you're feeling something, try to process it before you just start spewing it out, and find out what God says and speak that. So oftentimes when you're trying to work through something negative and a negative emotion, you just, if you're a Bible study, you go study. If you study the Bible, you figure out, okay, what did God say about this? And you speak the opposite, because he is your manufacturer, so he can give you advice on how to process these things. So we have one last beast after this one, but this is a four-headed one, and this is something that I encourage you to cut off all four of the heads of this beast, and to do everything in your power to stop this vortex of negativity, because being positive is the only way for you to move forward. And as long as you're grumbling, complaining, excuse making, you are going to stay stuck where you are. So join me next week for our last giant, the last of the 7 giants, which is fear. Thank you so much for joining me again, and send me a note. Let me know which of these 4 things that you have an issue with. Do you blame people a lot? You're always complaining. You make excuses for yourself. Negativity, is this part of your world? And how do you deal with it? Maybe you can share some coping mechanisms for other people. All right, take care. God bless you. Bye bye.